Well, good morning, everybody. It is Monday, February 2nd, and that makes it Groundhog's Day. And I'm recording this before the event happens, and so I just want to let you know I don't know what he's going to say. But I do want to tell you something neat about groundhogs. Normally, of course, they're hibernating this time of year, and I learned just recently, because I'm heading to Pennsylvania later today, so it's going to be kind of an interesting trip for me. I'm not going for the Groundhog Day. I'm going to talk to a different group out there. But I learned that when they hibernate, their body temperature can get down into the low 30s. I found out that their heart rate drops to 5 beats per minute and that they breathe just twice per minute. And what's interesting is they typically wake up from hibernation later in February or early March, and the first thing they do is go searching for a mate. So I don't know if that maybe is part of the reason they're so startled when woken up early by a guy in a large top hat shouting at them. But it's just kind of a fun tradition that we have. Now, just so you know, and I'm sure a lot of meteorologists are going to be talking about this. There's a great article put out there by the National Weather Service and the National Centers for Environmental Information, and that's where I got the image that you just saw. And what I want you to look at here is when they looked over the last decade at how well the groundhog has performed, they found that his accuracy is right around 30%, meaning that you could flip a coin and do a little better than the groundhog. He loves to predict more winter, just as you can see there in that chart. I think it would be in his best interest today to not do that, just to at least keep the morale of people up as we've been enduring quite a winter so far. So this is what I'm going to do today. Start of a new month. I'm going to review what happened last month. I think there's some critical things to learn. I want to talk about one significant transition that I think can happen, and I want to be just guarded and a bit careful because I'm hopeful for a shift in this pattern. It's going to take another week or so, but I'm hopeful in a shift in this pattern that could mean moisture for some of us that are very, very dry. Right now, we have two large storm systems, one in the North Pacific and one in the North Atlantic, that are just being separated by the United States here. And I want to just take a look at this frontal boundary that rips all the way down here. It goes right over, Puerto Rico and down into northern parts of South America. And look at the winds just coming through the passes here as Arctic air continues to spill farther and farther to the south. Now, as this system left North Carolina over the weekend, which we're going to look at the snowfall in just a second, it did catch much better upper level support, and it has since just ripped itself out into the open Atlantic, deepening rapidly as it did so. As you note, last week we thought there was a chance for this system to start to curl its way up the coast, but without high pressure over the Canadian Maritimes, that became very challenging. There's very cold and very dry air that has followed this, and we did get a glimpse yesterday as the system finally exited two neat things. The first is you can always tell when it is cold off the southern coast or eastern coast of the United States when you see this large clearing and then streets of clouds that form. Okay, that's a very common thing that happens. These are ocean effect clouds that are born on the heat from the ocean being basically contrasted against the cold air aloft. And the second thing is we can kind of get a good look at how much snow fell in parts of the Carolinas all the way back into Georgia. Now, a way to do that better is just to go look at the actual map, and this is what came out from the national analysis. Now, this was the weekend total snowfall, and I will be honest, weather forecast models in this area earlier last week really missed it. The way that this particular system deepened first as it came over the mountains, went farther to the south, and then rapidly intensified off the coast, gave us two large bands of snow, which I don't think the models really truly picked up on until we got into Thursday and Friday. And even at that, blended runs still brought much more snow into this area. I'm talking more into Virginia. But we did get very strong winds, heavy snow, 6 to 10 inches in some places, quite a bit more in these two pockets. But if you were in the middle and you were watching these forecasts all week, you're kind of like, well, hey, we were missed. This was a very challenging system to forecast because of its rapid intensification offshore. And as a result, that deeper low moved the system out quicker. And we were kind of looking at that at the vorticity maps last week, if you remember. But boy, it was a challenging one. We did note there was still more northwest flow giving us clippers across much of the rest of the United States for snow over this past weekend. But our focus this morning has to go back into the southeast, where we saw yesterday's low temperatures on Sundays get very cold, very far to the south. And we do have freeze warnings out again today. And just looking at Florida once again, I pulled up the surface observations before the sun rose this morning. And in the interior, here's Lake Okeechobee. I got to get my words right today. 28 degrees. We had 28 just north of that, 30 around Disney. And I saw 39 near Miami. These temperatures, 33 here. Pretty chilly again this morning in this region. Now, just putting this all together and thinking this through, I wanted just to step back and ask some other questions about the month, okay? So that cold air is exiting. It's done. We're going to start to bring in more mild conditions into the southeast. But real quick on precip, what did January give us? Well, we start to see some, much above average precipitation here and here. But I reminded you earlier, I think it was last week, that we have to be careful at looking at precip stats in winter because it doesn't take much precip to get into the top half of the distribution in this area. But when you're in the bottom half of the distribution, like we can see in these drier areas, this is an indication of just how dry this particular January has been. Now, parts of New Mexico, sections of Texas, and down here in Mississippi, Alabama, and a corner of Tennessee, we did get rain. A lot of the rest of this was snow and ice, which I was in Nashville yesterday and coming in on 65 and out on 24. Given the fact that the Arctic air has not relented, it was amazing to see how much ice was still on trees and vegetation. And my goodness, what a terrible icing event we saw down here. But back to this whole moisture idea. We started the month looking like this in terms of moisture. So that's what December gave us. And January only made those changes. Now this is down to 40 centimeters. This is NASA's modeled soil moisture percentile. So again, when you see these, you have to look at a rank. So it's like the wettest over a time period, and this is the driest over the time period. But I still see here that we have, overwinter drought that's surviving in certain places. I do want to mention California. Most of the month had a blocking high. So after a very wet time period in late December, early January, we flatlined for the Tulare Basin precipitation stations here in the Sierra Nevada. You kind of come up to the San Joaquin, and again, we flatlined. We're still above the average, but just a flat line after about January 4th. And you can see here in the northern Sierra, same thing. And this is what the pattern has done. It's avoided the west, giving us these snow water equivalent maps, these basin average maps, which leave a lot to be desired. I mean, let me just show you this. This was 1 year ago right now. All right, you can see the color bar here. This was a year ago, and our current year looks like this. Now, I understand that California is still drought-free. There's decent moisture in the snow, but we are going to have something in February and March to cap this off. And I'm getting very concerned about the snowpack over where the North Platte, reservoir of snow is, because as you can see, look at that line right there. We are at the bottom of the distribution historically, and you can also pick out here in the South Platte. Again, the bottom of the distribution. Now, it typically peaks in March. See this? So we have time, but we've got to change this pattern around. And I could do that for many places throughout the western states, including the Colorado Basin, which is the lowest snowpack in the last 10 years. And then you get into southern Rockies, and we're missing this. But don't forget these corners of the Pacific Northwest, which have got to see a pattern shift in order to revive this situation. The shift has to be here. You see the jet extended like this throughout the month of January, but it split just like that. That's that split flow that can often really do a tremendous amount of harm to western U.S. Precipitation patterns. And then we just saw multiple rounds of air coming out of the Canadian Prairie, diving into this trough, then exiting east. If you want to see it in terms of anomalies, this is your story. This was the direction in the upper levels of the atmosphere, the way the flow was going. And here, there was a low sitting in this area, but that flow was kind of doing this off the west. See that? And that's one of the reasons why after the beginning of January, we saw so much dry, air and dry conditions hitting the west, creating what has now been a bit of a winter drought in the region. So it's got to flip around. Something's got to give and start to change. Now, one thing that can move and hopefully will is the position of the polar vortex. For most of January, it slid down here as there was two large warming events that got into the Arctic like this, and we've displaced the polar vortex to have it sit more over the Hudson Bay, Canadian archipelago, and at times even down over the Great Lakes. And that's what drove the temperature pattern, as we talked about extensively on Friday, to have this split west versus east. That split was really made, I think, apparent at the end of the month. So from the 15th through the 1st, numerous places throughout the Ohio Valley here, Mississippi Valley, back to the Red River and Tennessee Valley, and also the Arkansas Valley here. Look at these major river valleys, just very cold. Same thing for the Carolinas. It was this cold, though, that came in and froze the soil so well that the snow and ice, everything that's come in, did not get into the ground, which is why we've not seen significant changes, in this air, soil moisture. Also, I made a bet last week. I said, hey, I think the Great Lakes might be up to 65% covered in ice by the time we got into this week. Well, even with all that cold, they're now at 55%. So they made a pretty big jump, but I thought we could get more out of it. So we need to ask, is there more cold air that's going to be coming into this pattern? And here's a clue to this. At the beginning of January, we had a strong, still at this point, La Nina. You can see it right in here. Strong trade winds. We were still dealing with the tail end of the negative phase of the Indian Ocean dipole. And by the end of the month, this is January 31st, upwelling of warmer water had returned. Trade winds had stopped advancing all the way across the Pacific. And we saw some westerly wind bursts, a shutdown of the Indian Ocean dipole. And now we're watching the transition out of La Nina. And that's just 1 month there to there. And now we are expecting by April and May for all of this to be turning over to warm water and the trade winds to have a component at times that's even backwards. And that's going to be the beginning of this next El Nino event. So this was a month of a lot of change. Now, the top thing for all of us going forward, if we're looking for what the big teleconnection is, I think it's going to start in the Arctic with the polar vortex moving, but it's going to be complemented by what's happening across the tropical ocean, tropical ocean convection pattern across the world, specifically in the Pacific. All right. We have now seen that we've left, the pattern has left the Pacific Ocean, and the deepest convection is returning back to the Indian Ocean. Okay, so that's the shift out of the Pacific back to the Indian Ocean. We call that phase 2 and phase 3 of the MJO, and that's expected to take shape later on in the month of February. Now, what that's going to do, the reason why we're going to talk about this is because that starts to reintroduce, especially if we get over into phase 3, it just reintroduces better flow, ridging here. And that if we can get something like this where we can displace a high later in the month over toward the Aleutian Islands, we will return, and this is the hope I have in the pattern, we're going to return something that could get us to kick off a few big storm systems off the Rockies. We've really only had, I think, one big one. That was the one between Christmas and New Year's that came off the Rockies and went to the North Woods of Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Michigan. And other than that, we've had clippers, and then we had the Arctic air that plunged down, giving us that big winter storm. And then this past weekend, the little Miller B that came off and then rapidly ripped itself across the Atlantic Ocean today. So where are we now? The next week, this is total accumulated precipitation as projected by the WPC. We notice a couple of things. There's still better moisture coming out of eastern Texas through the south and getting possibly over into parts of the southeast. But I'll be honest, when we look out there a week and we're seeing, total precipitation measured between 4 and 8 tenths, this is not a huge soaker. The Northwest, though, you can see, are starting to bring back flow that it hasn't had in a while, including to Northern California. And we're going to ask a question about how long the interior of the country here, getting into the Canadian Prairie, is going to see this dryness continue. Because over the next week, the probability of staying under 1/10 of an inch of liquid equivalent still remains very high for much of the Corn Belt, Wheat Belt, getting all the way back up here, the Canadian Prairie, down to the Sun Belt, Four Corner states. We're still seeing, flow coming in, rolling up over the top, coming through here. But these areas that are showing up in white are expected to see some more precip. And it is important to note that a lot of Florida is also very, very dry in this pattern too. But as I add on, so this goes out 1 week, the next Monday. If I add on week 2, that is shrinking relatively quickly. And by the time I put in a full 2 weeks, understanding that the first week is so dry in this area, the reductions that we're starting to see here suggest something's beginning to shift in the west first. And can we get systems to start to come out here? And how far across the plains do they leave the dryness? These are all top questions we've got to get in and start to answer. So here we go. This is what we're going to be watching for. Today, we're still stuck in the same old pattern. There's one low, there's another low, and in the middle, a large ridge. All right, and this is what's promoting all of that cold air this morning over the southeast. As I play this forward, I'll come back just in a few moments to the deep low that's going to come through the mid-south here and head off to the east. But it's relatively small compared to the depth of this ridge that's just pushing into the Canadian Prairie. Now that's by Wednesday into Thursday, and Friday we go. Now watch next weekend, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. 1 week from now, we start to see an acceleration of the jet here. And it seems to be dropping a trough in the ensembles into the west. There's ridging, meaning a warm-up that's going to happen in this area, and that flow, follow the contours, is out of the south and west. And there's this chance, February 10th, 11th, 12th, of getting a system to climb over the Rocky Mountains, reinvigorate with what we call lee cyclogenesis on the lee side of the mountains, spinning up and sending a storm system across the central U.S. And then when I get out there farther, like February 15th and beyond, and the models no longer show just permanent, ridging over the west. And just have a look at this. Ridge, trough. It's kind of what, ridging, trough. This is something similar to phase maybe 3 of the MJO. Okay, so what does that look like? Well, to get us started, we have one system to watch that's coming right in on that shortwave. Do you see the split in the flow? Like that, and then down. All right, that's still another week. But this little wave wiggling through here is going to be interesting to watch today and tomorrow. Get over the Mid-South. Now, the jet is clearly ripping that system that went over the Carolinas out to open ocean today. But we're going to keep an eye right here. Because in the forecast model, looking at the NAM, here we go. This is this morning. It's going to bring some snow right in through here while a system tries to hit much of like this part of coastal Washington. We still have the snow from last night moving through the Great Lakes. It's very light snow. But this is Monday afternoon and evening. And what we're seeing here is that wave by tomorrow morning could be living somewhere over the Mid-South, the Delta, possibly some snow in the Ohio River Valley. And then it's going to go right here, spreading snow into, out of Kentucky into West Virginia. And Virginia, we're really just in the Appalachian Mountains. And rain over the snow that's going to be trying to melt here in the Carolinas. And there it goes. So there is one system to watch. But on, I think, a more grand note of how these next few systems are going to play out, let's just go to the European model. So here it is. That's the system we're talking about right here. Where are we in time? This is Tuesday evening, according to the European. Very similar forecast as the high-res NAM. After that, there's this clipper that we've been monitoring all weekend in the forecast for later this week that could sneak through parts of Ohio and Pennsylvania and also here into parts of Ontario and Quebec. The low is way up farther north, but there could be some snow into this region late this week. But that's kind of the only two main players hitting much of the United States as you work through this particular work week. Now, at the end of this week, again, another deepening low. And you know the problem. High pressure keeps coming in behind these, not setting up farther to the north. And if that sets up farther to the north, then these lows roll up the north. But you can tell it's going to be bringing in some snow and another shot at cold air to the north and east. Now, by Sunday, February 8th, we start to see more fronts interacting with the Pacific Northwest. See this? And adding some snow into the Rockies. There are still clippers rolling through this. This next one came through. We get out there to February 9th and 10th, and that clipper goes right through parts of Ontario into Quebec and maybe some rain to the south. But whatever came over the Rockies by Wednesday, February 11th is trying to take shape in the midsection of the country. And it's right now in the forecast, again, this is about 9 days out, it's a snowmaker in Iowa, Wisconsin, southern Minnesota, and a rainmaker in Illinois, Missouri, and parts of the eastern Corn Belt. And if that can come through, that signals a warm-up, which is good. We need that. And it also signals just something different. I mean, to see a storm system, watch, I'm going to go back to February 10th, come out of the Rockies and go all the way to New York. Boy, that would be nice to get that in there. And the models aren't done. They bring in another one on the 13th, 14th, 15th. See it here? This is the 15th. And now it shows another low trying to rip its way across the country. So let's do something with this. Why don't we just go straight to some of the other variables like typical snowfall or measure the snowfall here from the model. And here we go. So total snow out of here. Maybe this is a 2 to 4 inch snowfall event in this area. And then we play this on forward. There is the clipper coming through. This one might deepen rapidly off the coast, but that'll be a challenging forecast to see who gets snow along the coast. Your next clipper comes through Ontario like we talked, but look, out west, already by February 9th, there's some snow. So that is something that was in the models last week, and it maintained. I'm impressed with the European model. We need every bit of this, and to get snow across Nebraska, which is right now snow-free. In fact, so much of the Missouri Valley is snow-free right now. We've got to get this going. So to see some snow possibly coming in, again, where now this is not this Thursday, but next Thursday. I just need to be clear. This is way out in the forecast. Let's keep an eye on that. Total precipitation, let's go look at that. So this is liquid equivalent. There we go. And what I want to overlay here or look at here is just how much moisture is really in this. So our first system, this gets us through this week. All right, not a lot. You saw that a moment ago. Watch the west. Yeah, that starting next, let's see here, Saturday into Sunday, we're adding moisture in. But this is the gap we're trying to fill. And you've got to get flow out of the southwest to make that happen. And what we're seeing here is that it's trying, but it's going to take a whole lot more. That's a 15-day forecast from the European model on precipitation. Lastly, before I switch off of this, I do want to have a quick look at winds and just see if we've got any, highly anomalous wind gusts out of this. Let's go ahead and play it. Here we go. Some stronger winds coming off the mountains here. But out through Thursday and Friday this week, not a whole lot to talk about. Some stronger winds coming over the Great Lakes with that clipper. Big time blow up of the system out into open ocean, but that's just going to create large waves. It's going to largely stay away from the northeast, although there will be some stronger winds with it. But the potency of that system coming in mid-month, okay, watch February 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. That's what I'm going to say, okay? All right, we've had a good look at it. Let's now compare the models. I want you to see this. Is this system next week showing up in both models? Well, first of all, Tuesday's system going through parts of Kentucky, Tennessee, looks pretty good in both models. So watch here for snow. And then if we play forward, that one moves east. Clipper comes over the Great Lakes out of Ontario. There it is. Both models have that. This is now Thursday night, Friday morning. Spread some snow into the northeast. Now, here we go. I'm trying to see if February 8th, if the GFS picks up on this system like the European did. So the European is deeper. It's got a much deeper wave here. But there is at least something taking shape in both the models on the 10th and 11th in the midsection of the country. See that? And that is good model agreement, which is why I'm trying to provide a little bit of hope in this forecast at bringing moisture into certain areas. Now, we're not going to do anything more with it than that. Just understand there's something moving through that we need to consider. Most of the models into week 2 begin to show the wetter pattern arriving. This is the new European. There's the GFS. I mean, just have a look at this. To start to see this increase in, toward the wetter side of the distribution is such a welcome sight. Now, what'll also help if we can change this up, because one of the pieces helping to drive dry air into the country out of Canada is this elongated piece of the polar vortex with 2 stratospheric warm spots on either side. Right now, the latest European model is taking this by February 4th and 5th and 6th. Now watch. Getting out there in the 7th, 8th, 9th. Watch. See the change happening? And as we move the polar vortex around, this could be an early key of bringing in that mild air, which could set up the pattern in order to get a storm system to finally come out of the south and west. So let's go look at the temperatures. That was at the end of the time period. Here's today. These are highs. Getting into tomorrow and then Wednesday. Very mild across the plains. Very mild in the west. Colder air still lingering in the north and east. Then we get into Thursday. Huge warm up here. Talking about temperatures in the 50s, 60s, maybe cracking 70 in the plains. Friday's temperatures. Saturday, very cold one in the northeast. That's when the clipper comes through. Sunday, it exits and develops offshore. But I want to show you what we think might happen as this warmer air invades into the midsection of the country by looking at snow depth. So what you're going to see here is as the warmer air Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday begins to creep in from the west, look at the snow area shrink by Saturday into Sunday and Monday. See that? Just shrinking. Now remember, starting next week on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we have this chance of bringing in another system running through here. And I'd love to get some snow into parts of Nebraska and back into Iowa. But again, that's 9 to 10 days out. But I think it's important that you see this snow that's already on the ground is going to be melting and sublimating, evaporating, and we're going to see quite a bit of it go away in the near term. Beyond that, though, look at the temperatures every day. So these are daily temperature anomalies from the 0Z European. This is today. So yeah, we're 20 plus degrees colder than normal down south. This is tomorrow on the 3rd. There's the 4th and 5th. Look at the mild air coming into Canada. And I misspoke last week saying it was still quite cold, but no, you get above 30 degrees above normal. We're above freezing in places here across the Canadian prairie. The east hangs on to the cold the longest as we go into the 6th and 7th. Look at that. You get into the 8th and 9th. It's still cold in the northeast, but very mild air the 9th and the 10th. And this is when this system is going to try to come out, which is why we're going to be watching for more rain to the southern side of that system than snow. Now, it doesn't mean we're done with cold air with this mild surge that's coming through, but I am so happy to see this in the models. Drop the cold back here, bring in the troughs, warmth out ahead of it, that just gets the flow reoriented. And it's showing up in the ensembles. Next 5 days, transition to day 5 through 10. Now watch the west, ready? Look at the mild conditions coming back in here. Watch the west though. Day 10 through 15, dropping those temperatures off. Oh yeah. This starts to build warmth, open up the Gulf, get systems to come through, and it's a signal toward a better chance. It's tilting the odds. It's not making this perfect of getting storm systems to do that. And we haven't had that for a very, very long time this winter. Right now, the Climate Prediction Center says, though, once you get past mid-month, it's still got this idea of warmer air coming back here and colder air staying here. They've also updated their new 1-month outlook for February. And they've got, this is going to be 100% right for the next week. Just cold conditions here and mild there. But we do see into week 2, this flips cold and more mild. So I don't know how this month is going to play out. I don't think a 1-month map is going to capture what it could possibly do. I do want to show you the models, though. European model, I'll be honest with you, I think it's got a bit of a problem. Here's the next week. That's week 2, so day 8 through 15. Then we get out there past the middle of the month, week 3 into week 4. All right, you start to see it cool off again. Now remember, the European model has a bias in the west of keeping things cold middle half and second half of winter. But as we go out there further, the European model into March just wants to keep that around. It tries to bring in some mild conditions here, but it keeps the northeast cold and the west, the west, I put a W, but west cold as well. But look at this. This is the GFS extended. And I'm starting to buy into this. That's the next week. That's week 2. We know that, right? So this gets us out there to the 10th through the 17th. Now watch. It is not shaking the mild air or returning as we finish February and go into March. Frequent shots at colder air here. Now that goes against my analogs, which had a lot of cold air in reservoir here in the month of February. But the current GFS is doing something a little different. Look what it's doing on precipitation. Let's do the 30 days ending on March the 8th. It has reintroduced better moisture to the north and west. Not so much into California, but this, we've kind of shrunk the area that was forecast dry. And unfortunately, it suggests a lot of the cotton belt in the south has drier risks. Again, February to March 8th. But I don't know if we truly, in fact, change this pattern up, forgive me, to start to bring in better flow here, we will be dragging fronts through this area, bringing precip. European model is even more dry in the south going forward, and that's probably one of the reasons why the newest seasonal drought outlook encapsulated more of the south and southeast into the drought persists category, or even drought develops. And that's going to be an ongoing concern until we get into this typical spring precipitation pattern. Remember, La Niñas tend to light this area up with a lot of severe storms, this whole region that I'm kind of bullseyeing here. El Niños tend to reduce spring severe weather activity in this area. And that's an important part of the hydrologic cycle, so we actually need that moisture from those storms. Okay, what about South America as we finish this up? We did get some new harvesting progress numbers compared to the last 5 years. Mato Grosso was at 25%. That's way above the average. But the safrinha corn is not going in super fast. It's actually below the 5-year average. I was looking at some NDVI data, and we now have 7 weeks of across Brazil's cropland of new record high NDVI. But there's been concern, I'm going to go show it to you first here, of the dryness in southern Brazil, Uruguay, and parts of Argentina, including Buenos Aires, Cordoba, Santa Fe, Entre Rios, this whole region, which is very productive. So I want to flip this back over, and let's go to the map. I'm going to change this to admin level 1 and zoom in here a bit, and let's just click on Buenos Aires. And yeah, the NDVI has come back down to average. If we add in Cordoba and then Santa Fe and Entre Rios, the NDVI values have been slowly dropping as you want them to go up toward the peak of the season in terms of how green, basically, the crop and how healthy it can look from space. As I look down there, I did want to find, are any of the weather stations showing problems? And so if we click near Cordoba, did the website crash? It was crashing all morning. I'm so sorry, folks. I'll have to try to, let me see, see if I can get this to come back up. Yes, I'm a human. This is a very valuable website, but it's got some problems. Like it's trying to start me off way over here in the ocean. There we go. Now we can see more of it. And does it work? All right, good. So I picked out a spot in Buenos Aires. And what you notice is that plenty of precip above average, but they've just flatlined here in the month of January. And that's kind of the case anywhere you look. I'll go up to Cordoba just as another example. So you see plenty of precipitation early, but these big flat lines here, bringing them below normal in precip is what's got us concerned. Now, over the next week, both models, the European and the GF, are drier down here and much wetter farther to the north. But they're all taking that out about 10 days and then into week 2, flipping it. And this is critical. If these rains do manifest themselves here, then we will kind of see a Band-Aid put on this pattern, which was pushing things toward drier and of greater concern. All right, that is all I have for you today. Here, maybe in another hour, the groundhog will be out. We'll get a forecast from him, and we'll see how it all goes. I will talk to you again on Wednesday. Matt will pick it up tomorrow. Be safe, and we'll talk soon. Thanks.